Hi, everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm Joel Chorny with the Law Office of Joel Chorny here in Tucson, Arizona. And today we're going to be talking about why it is so important for you not to answer the questions that the police ask you in a DUI investigation. I'm going to be going through the DUI worksheet that law enforcement officers use in the jurisdictions that I practice. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through how this worksheet works and point out how the questions that the police ask are trick questions meant to trip you up and get you to provide information that's only going to make it easier for them to prosecute you. And hopefully you will see that when I say keep your mouth shut, exercise your right to remain silent, and do so, that is in fact the advice that you need to follow. So that's what we're going to do today. You saw the title of today's episode of this chat is Police DUI Questions Are a Trap. Here's why you should stay silent. And that's what we're going to cover today. Before I get started, I'll remind you that these videos that I'm putting out here are meant to be educational, informative, but they're not meant to be taken as legal advice. And watching these videos does not create an attorney-client relationship between us. I'm only licensed to practice law in Arizona. So if you're looking for help with a matter that is outside of Arizona, you're looking for help from someone other than me. However, if you have a question or a matter that does involve Arizona, feel free to give me a call at the phone number that you see on the screen. Now let's dive right in, shall we? So the DUI worksheet is just like a questionnaire that is meant to help the police remember what questions to ask. It's meant to kind of flow from top left to right and work your way down the way you would read on a page. Basic. The very first thing on the sheet are the Miranda warnings, and they are laid out right there in black and white for the officer to read. And we've already talked about these in a past video that you've watched probably. And if not, I recommend that you check it out. But it goes to the Miranda warnings. And then after the officer advises the person of their Miranda rights, the first question that the officer asks is, do you understand these rights? There's really nothing wrong with answering that question, because the whole point is that you do understand those rights, and you're going to follow my suggestion of not answering their questions because you do in fact understand those rights. So the correct answer is yes. However, if you don't understand, if the way they read it to you is confusing or you're just not following, it's okay for you to say no. What's going to happen is the officer is then going to read them to you again, perhaps try to explain them, which is hazardous since they don't have any real legal training, and then ask you again, do you understand these rights? And if you don't understand the rights and they can't get you to understand them, they're not going to ask you any questions. But they might argue that the reason you didn't understand your rights is because you were under the influence. So probably best to say, yes, you do understand the rights. And then the follow-up question to that is, now, having been advised of these rights and understanding these rights, will you answer my questions? The only correct answer to that question is no. Because if you don't say no, if you say yes, then all of these other questions are going to come your way, which I'm going to go through to show you why it's such a bad idea to answer these questions. But if you had just said no when asked, if you would answer their questions, that would be the end of it. They cannot keep trying to prod you for information they can use against you. So the very most important thing for you to take away from this video is that when they ask you, will you answer my questions? The correct answer is no. Let's say that you're one of many clients I've had who do not follow that logic and say, yeah, sure, I'll answer your questions. What comes next? Well, the officer is going to ask you first, where are you? And what they're looking for is an answer about location that they can argue is off. So if you say, I am at the intersection of 6th and 6th, and it turns out that you're actually at the intersection of 8th and 5th, they're going to put that down. And then they're going to argue that you were disoriented. You didn't know where you were at the moment. And that is indication that you are under the influence. So again, why it's not a good idea to answer any of the questions. You never know. It's easy when the adrenaline is pumping, when the stress of being on the side of the road with a police officer who's clearly investigating you for a DUI is taking hold. It's easy to be disoriented. And what one person would count as nervousness, they're going to count as evidence that you're DUI. So that's what that question's about. They're going to, so in the form, they don't only just put down your answer for where are you now, but they'll actually put down actual location. And that shows you that that's the purpose. Now, they don't show you this sheet when you're being investigated. They just ask you questions. Part of the value of this video, I hope, is that I'm sharing with you what it is that the police are referring to when they're asking you those questions. But on the sheet itself, it is priming them to be on the lookout for any inconsistencies between where you actually are and where you say say you are, and they'll document the actual location. Then they're going to ask you, what have you been drinking? And then in parentheses, drugs have you been using? Notice that that question assumes that you've been drinking. It doesn't give you the option of saying, I haven't been drinking at all. Now, you could say that, say, I haven't been drinking at all, but the question doesn't prime you for that. The question assumes you've been drinking. So that shows you the inner of this questionnaire. It shows you how the police are not really being trained to keep an open mind and to remain objective and impartial. They are there to suss out evidence that helps them prosecute you for a DUI. So I want you to really take that in, that they're not asking you, have you had anything to drink? They're asking you, what have you had to drink? Assuming that concludes. Moving up to the next part of this sheet, they're going to ask you if you're currently being treated by a doctor or a dentist. And that is because they want to rule out arguments that you're going to try to make down the road that the way they administered a brush test was improper, or that it was improper for them to have you do the stupid human tricks, which is what I call the field sobriety tests. If you're going to say that you have an injury or you have a condition that would have kept you from being able to complete the test. So they ask you that question right at the top to rule out that you're under any kind of medical care. They don't tell you that's why they're asking you that, but that's why they're asking you that. Now, if you say, yes, you are being treated by a doctor, they're going to ask you for the name of the doctor or dentist. They're going to ask you, when were you last treated? They're going to ask you what you're being treated for. They're going to ask you if you're taking any medicine or drugs. And if you say yes, they're going to ask you what it is that you're taking. They're going to ask you why. They're going to ask you when you took it, what amounts. They're going to ask you if you're diabetic, if you take insulin, if you're epileptic, if you have allergies. They're going to ask you if any of those conditions are bothering you at the moment. And again, this is to rule arguments out for you in your defense. They want to make it so that you can't go down the road later and say, oh, well, my allergies were acting up, because they specifically asked you about allergies if you said you didn't have any. Again, best approach to this is to exercise your right to remain silent and answer no questions. But we're talking about what these questions are and why the answers are just never helpful. When did you last eat? They want to be able to make an argument that you were drinking on an empty stomach. They'll ask you, what did you eat? They'll ask you if there's anything in your mouth. Do you have any false teeth? When did you last sleep? How many hours? So that if you have plenty of sleep, that you can't argue that you are sleep deprived or you're just tired. They're going to ask you what day of the week it is. And again, next to that is the actual day of the week. They are expecting you to get the day wrong. And if you do, they're going to argue that's because you're so darn drunk. They're going to ask you for the date. And again, they're going to document what the actual date is for the exact same reasons. What time is it? And then they document the actual time. And then they're going to ask you, were you driving? Now, that's a huge question, right? Because one of the most effective ways to defend against a DUI is to point out that the state can't prove that the person was driving. Now, if they pulled you over, that's not going to help. Why would they ask you if you were driving when they pulled you over, right? Because there's a standardized form that they use in every DUI investigation. So there are DUI investigations where they don't actually pull the person over. They come upon the vehicle, pulled over to the side of the road, or crashed into something. And so they ask, were you driving? And if you say yes, it's going to make it that much harder to argue that you weren't down the road. They're going to ask you, where are you coming from? They're going to ask you, where are you going? And then they're going to be thinking, okay, so if that's where you're coming from and that's where you're going, are you even anywhere in the ballpark in the right place for you to be, given your stated path of travel? And I've seen plenty of police officers make the argument that this person said they were going somewhere, but they were actually heading in the opposite direction, which they could argue makes the person less credible. Maybe they're lying. So maybe they're so darn drunk that they don't even know where they are, where they're going. They're going to ask, where were you drinking or using drugs? Again, they are assuming that you were drinking or using drugs. They don't ask you, were you drinking or using drugs? They ask you, where were you drinking or using drugs? They're going to ask you, how much were you drinking, or how much drugs did you consume? Again, not asking if you've been drinking or if you've been consuming drugs. It's how much have you been drinking? How much have you been consuming? They're going to ask you, when did you start drinking or using drugs? They're going to ask you, when did you stop drinking or using drugs? Again, assuming that you have been. They're going to ask you, did you drink or use anything in the last hour before you drove? And if so, how much? Just ruling out your arguments for your defense. It is not a good idea to answer any of these questions. It's not a good idea to be selective about the questions you're going to answer either. The only way you can protect yourself is by exercising your right to remain silent and answering no questions. If you get selective about it, then they get to use your refusal to answer certain questions against you. But if you answer no questions after you've exercised your right to remain silent, they cannot use your silence against you at all. Please note that. My favorite trick question on this form is the one that follows. They ask, at the time that you were driving, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being drinking or using drugs and not feeling the effects, progressing to 10, and where 10 is falling down drunk, where do you place yourself? What number do you put yourself at? Now, this is a trick question, because anywhere you put yourself on that scale, you are making an admission to drinking or using drugs. And that's not how they want you to take it, but that's how they're going to use it. So the only correct answer, if you're going to answer these questions, which again, I strongly urge you not to do, but if you are going to answer this question, the only correct answer is 0. But here's the problem. If there's plenty of evidence that you have been drinking outside of your answer to this question, that answer of a 0 is going to make you look like a liar. So that is, again, why it is so much better to just not answer any of these questions. But if you put yourself on any of the numbers on that scale from 1 to 10, you are admitting to drinking or using drugs. And that's a problem. Now, mind you, the most common answer I've seen to that question is 2, because people misunderstand the question to be how much have you had to drink? And so everyone goes, a couple of drinks. And that unfortunately is often because people will remember the first drink and will remember the last drink, but they lose count of all the drinks in between. So when a police officer hears a couple or 2, they're thinking, oh, this person's really drunk. Again, not a good idea to answer these questions. They're going to ask you after that, do you feel any effects of the alcohol or drugs that you have drank or used? Whether you say yes or no, it doesn't really matter. It's a bad idea to answer the questions, but if you say yes, then you have admitted that you're being affected by the substances that you've consumed, and therefore you are making it much easier for them to prove that you were driving impaired, at least to the slightest degree, which is what they have to prove for a simple DUI. They're going to ask you, do you feel the alcohol you drank or the drugs you used has affected your driving to the slightest degree? They're just asking you for you to basically tell on yourself. Don't answer these questions. They're going to ask you, is your driver's license valid? Yes or no? And then they're going to document what the driver said. Now, here in Arizona, driving without a valid license while under the influence makes it a felony. So they have to show that your license was not valid and that you had noticed that your license was not valid. And if you say, yeah, I know my license is not valid, then you've done their job for them. It's going to be that much easier for them to prove that you had notice of that fact. It's not a question that's helpful to you. And then they document the date and time of the arrest. Mind you, that's where that form goes. So this concludes with an arrest. It doesn't say, did the person get arrested? No. It's the date and time of the arrest. Then after that on this form, there's a bunch of signs and symptoms of impairment observed throughout the contact. And what you'll notice is that they don't document all of the things that work in your favor. So they document things like for odor of intoxicants, none, faint, moderate, strong. And then they have other. For clothing, they'll put down soiled by either blood, dirt, saliva, urine, vomit, or other, disorderly, torn, missing articles. But if you look fine, don't document that. They'll say, oh, well, if I had noticed anything remarkable, I would have marked it. But they don't. It just shows you how tunnel visioned they are. They're looking for evidence of guilt. They're not looking for evidence of innocence. They are not your friends in this process. They're not trying to help you out. And that's what I want to impress upon you with this video. So hopefully now you have seen that these questions that the police ask are designed to get a successful prosecution. They're not designed to get to the truth. They're not designed to protect you. They are designed to get as many people off of the road with DUI charges as they can. And that is why I strongly urge anyone watching this video to seriously consider your right to remain silent, and that you must exercise that right to protect yourselves. I hope you found this video illuminating, interesting, educational. If you know of anyone who could benefit from watching this video, please feel free to share it with them. Don't forget to click on the bell, subscribe to the channel so that you get updates for every time I post new content. Leave comments. I would love to know how these videos are being received. If you have any questions, concerns, objections, I'd love to take them on. And I thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.